If you've downloaded a Plus package or have a retitle package and you want to edit the brand of the series, then this tutorial is what you want to check out. Now, all of the projects on Pixel Preacher are built very similar so that it makes your job easy as far as editing and changing some things around. So now they won't all be identical, but they all will be structured very similar to just make your life a little bit easier. So we're going to spend our time in Photoshop. So you should have opened up a zip file. You want to make sure that you install the fonts that are included for the project. So if you need some help understanding how to do that, there's a tutorial on that. So be sure to check out that tutorial on installing fonts and checking out this help file. So assuming you have installed the fonts, then let's jump into one of the Photoshop files. So let's start with the brand folder. I'm going to open up this in Photoshop by double clicking. And yours should look pretty much identical to this. Again, if these fonts don't look quite the same, then maybe you didn't quite install those right. So double check and make sure you got that taken care of. So again, all of them are built very similar. You should have a bunch of folders to the right in the layer panel, and there should be a folder labeled red, and that means that's the folder that you really want to, that you're going to be spending your time in editing the text. So if you open up that folder, you should have maybe a few other folders. Again, they're not gonna be quite the same, but it should be something very similar. So most projects there will be a text layer that you can go in and edit, and some projects there may even be an Illustrator file, and we'll get to that in just a second. So for those that are just basic text files, all you want to do is open up that folder, get it nice and laid out like you want it, and then I want to click on the text tool, or I can hit T on the keyboard to get my text tool. And then when I scroll over the text that I want to change, I'm looking for the cursor to not have that dotted line on it. So I'm going to scroll over, and then you'll see it change right there, and it doesn't have any dotted lines around. That means that I'm going to edit that text. So here I'm going to change this. So maybe you want this to say, from death do us part. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to type in death right there. Okay. And maybe I want this to say up here to say till death. So I'm going to find that layer. So that's the 4 layer, and there's a folder right here that says 4. I'm going to open up that. I'm going to click on that text layer. I'm going to drag my mouse over it and click on that layer. I'm going to change that to the text that I need. And then the rest is pretty much the same. So you can change all of your different layers here. Now, again, not all projects will do the same, so this may not help you out, but you can change some of the basics of projects by transforming layers. So for instance, this rectangle is a little too small, so I'm going to hit T on the keyboard. I'm going to hit, select the layer. I'm going to hit Command T, and now I can drag that layer out to change its size. So that's one way you can do that. It's a very helpful tool for a lot of things. Okay, so inside of Photoshop, again, you'll have a bunch of layers inside this red labeled folder where you can change the text. Most designs will have a tagline of some sort, and that should be labeled correctly. And again, that should just be a text layer, which you can change right here. And then once you have it just like you want it, you go to File and Save as a JPEG, and you're all set. We won't go into these other folders. You're welcome to go in and play around with those, but they change some of the colors. Some of the backgrounds can change as well. So not all projects will be quite that easy. Some other projects may require you to dive into Illustrator a little bit to change the text, and that's because Illustrator can do some things that Photoshop is not very good at. So it makes the project look a lot better if you can manipulate some of the text in Illustrator. So let me give you an example of that. So I'm going to look at another project that we have, this finance series. I'm going to go to the project files. I'm going to go into Photoshop. I'm going to go into the brand, and I'm going to open up this PSD here. So inside of here, again, we have your main background. You have your main brand here, and it gets labeled red. And this is the area in the folder that I want to spend my time in. A lot of this was rendered in Cinema 4D, which is a 3D program, but again, it's built in such a way that you can change the text all around without having to mess with that other program. So, but this is an example of where you're going to need to spend a little bit of time in Illustrator if you're going to change this text around. So if you run into layers that aren't text layers that look like this, so there's this little icon that has a little chain link on it. That means that that's a smart layer, or it's somehow embedded. It's a linked file that leads you probably to Illustrator. So in order to change this text around, you're going to need to right click on this layer and open it up, or I think you can just double click on this this little chain link here, and that should take you straight to Illustrator. So let's try that out. Okay, so here you can see this is kind of the rough structure of what you just saw in Photoshop. It just doesn't have any textures or anything on it. It's just the altered text here. Maybe I want to change this to say something different. Maybe I want this to say the power of, and maybe this should say money. So Illustrator is slightly different in based on compared to Photoshop. So there's still some layer panels over here, but it's very similar in the sense that you just click on your text tool, can go in and change some of these layers. So like we said, we'll make this say the power of money. Again, I'm not doing anything special besides clicking on that layer and changing it. So then I'm going to click on down here, and this one, you can see here that this is the body text, and then the actual layer has been kind of augmented a little bit. So again, I'm just going to type in money, and that fits pretty well. I'm going to click on my pointer tool, just step back and take a look at it. That looks pretty good. So now, if I were to save this, it will update automatically inside of Photoshop. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit save. It's going to save. I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and now it has updated just right. So you want to make sure that your title is somewhat similar to where it'll fit in here. You don't want anything too big or too wide that won't fit correctly. And then some layers in Photoshop may look something like this, to where you don't have any text on here. That's because it's on a path, and you can see that it's on this curved path. But to change that, it's very simple. All you do is click on it just like you would any other layer by hitting the clicking on the text tool, clicking and highlighting your text, and changing it to whatever you want. So you can make that whatever text you need it to be. You can click on that and go into your character panel, change the size up and down to make it fit just right. So if you run into those issues in Photoshop, then that's how you're going to want to edit those files. So I hope that helps you, and if you have any questions, be sure to let us know. Thanks. Bye.